Falcons and the Titans. These observations, college football style, brought to you by Geico. Switch to Geico today and see all the ways you could save.
Number one.
Number one for me from the college football season, week one, Anthony Richardson, quarterback for the University of Florida. Freddie, I said time and time again last year, not this year, last year, that I thought Anthony Richardson should have been the starting quarterback for the University of Florida. They went with Emory Jones instead last year. But when I look at a guy like Anthony Richardson, you talk about 6'4", about 200, between 200, 235 pounds, elusive, athletic, fast, can run, strong arm. I think about a guy named Cam Newton. I think he's more athletic than Cam Newton, though. But I watched this guy this past weekend against Utah, who has a really good team, offensively, defensively, and on special teams. But Anthony Richardson, time and time again, made plays, threw 468 yards, very high percentage, completion percentage. Also ran for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns to help Florida come back and win that football game. But it was the youngster in Anthony Richardson that didn't make the plays that cost his team the game. Instead, at the end of the game, it was Cameron Rising, the quarterback who I had a lot of faith in, that didn't make the play and turned the football over and didn't even allow Utah to kick a field goal. So when I'm looking at a guy like Anthony Richardson, I look at his intangibles, and a lot of people said before this season that he could possibly go in the first round. I think after his first game, he's not only going to go in the first round, but I think he's going to be a top 10 pick if he continues to be consistent and lead Florida to more wins this season.
Number two,
I'm going to go with the UGA offense and Stetson Bennett.
Stetson Bennett, by the way.
Stetson Bennett the fourth. That's right. And that's important because I'm the fourth, too. So I know he wants it being said. Stetson Bennett and his confidence coming into this season is the confidence that he had in the national championship game last year. This offense put up over 570 yards of offense. Stetson Bennett himself threw for 368, 2 touchdowns. When you have guys like Brock Bowers, Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Darnell Washington, Gilbert, 2 backs in McIntosh and Milton, Stetson Bennett can just walk in there and say, you know what, I am the mailman. I deliver on Sundays and holidays, even if you don't think we do. So Stetson Bennett, I think, and I tweeted something, kind of being funny, but kind of being serious, too, at the same time. Hey, Stetson Bennett for Heisman? We don't know yet. But the man's confidence, he got a haircut. The man got a haircut, and he's playing even different this year already. He has confidence, Freddie.
Number three,
I'm going to go with Ohio State's run game. Ohio State found themselves being down in that football game. They were struggling offensively. Jackson Smith and Jigba got banged up early in that football game, so C.J. Stroud didn't have his top guy. They found out they got a young receiver, Ibuka, who's going to be phenomenal for them. 9 catches, 90 yards in that game this past weekend against Notre Dame. But the run game, Travion Henderson had over 90 yards. And then Mayan Williams, the last score that Ohio State had, I literally tweeted, it's the Mayan Williams drive. And I had an opportunity because I know their running back coach really well, Tony Alford. I talked to him after the game, and he basically said, I got some dogs. I got 2 dogs. I got 2 studs. And Ohio State, who in the past was looked at as being a finesse football team, especially if you looked at last year and the games that they lost, they didn't show finesse in that first game against Notre Dame. They showed defensively that they can get it done under Jim Knowles, who came from Oklahoma State. But offensively, when the team needed it the most, the running backs and the offensive line pushed on the Notre Dame defensive line, and they got it done.
Number four,
the ACC. The ACC might want to stop scheduling Group of 5 teams to play because when you look at what happened this weekend, you talk about Old Dominion beating Virginia Tech. That was one. Then you looked at the UNC, the Tar Heels, playing Appalachian State. That could have ended up in being a loss. If it wasn't for a quarterback missing a 2-point conversion throw, they would have lost that game. North Carolina, that was, and App State would have won. But they didn't win. North Carolina, Mac Brown, they're dancing. I don't know why they're dancing because they literally should have lost that football game.
Oh, that's
and
what
they gave up like 40 points in the fourth quarter, which is unheard of. To me, unheard of. And then you see East Carolina against NC State and their field goal kicker missing the field goal to extra point to actually tie the field goal up, and then they got a punt block for a touchdown. So Devin Leary and the NC State Wolfpack, I know they're happy and excited that they actually got out of that. But if I'm the ACC, I might start thinking twice about scheduling Group of 5 opponents.
Number 5.
Number 5. So on Thursday night, last Thursday that is, I got a chance to be in Pittsburgh for the Backyard Brawl. As if you're watching right now, that game ended with an interception for a touchdown. Pittsburgh and West Virginia should be playing every year. This is the first time they played, Freddie, since 2011, and I don't understand why it was that drought. The most watched football game in Pittsburgh, I think it might have been history, was Thursday night, the Backyard Brawl, the Pitt Panthers versus West Virginia Mountaineers. I was there. It was electric. And I think every year, starting on that Thursday night football game, I think it should start with the Backyard Brawl, literally.
That's a great idea. By the way, those are the HD observations from Harry Douglas doing that right here with me, Freddie Coleman, on Keyshawn, Jalen, and Max, presented by Progressive Insurance. Hit us up anytime on ESPN Radio and watch us on ESPN2. I'm going to start there with the Backyard Brawl because this has been a bone of contention with me. Not so much with Pittsburgh versus West Virginia, but because of conference expansion and super conferences. Yeah, Pittsburgh in the ACC and West Virginia one time, both these two teams, these rivals were in the Big East Conference and now West Virginia in the Big 12. That should matter when you have those two teams in close proximity not playing each other in football. It makes absolutely no sense. It's the same thing with Kansas and Missouri. They don't play anymore, and that was a rivalry that started during the Civil War involving both of those programs. The fact that Kansas and Missouri aren't playing anymore because Kansas and the Big 12, Missouri moved to the SEC makes no sense to me. I get it that Texas A&M didn't want to play Texas anymore. Now they don't have any choice because after 2025, they're going to be conference rivals. So now they're back to being a little brother again when it comes to Texas. But that's why they went to the SEC, so they wanted to get out of their shadow with Texas having the Longhorn Network and everything like that. That shouldn't allow rivalries, long-standing rivalries, to not be played anymore. Have some sense in your brains to realize it's good for your programs. It's good for both communities involving these programs. The fact that Kansas, Missouri doesn't play anymore and that Pittsburgh and West Virginia did not play for a long time made absolutely no sense to me, and it still doesn't make any sense to this day.
Yeah, when you look at that game, Freddie, and when I was in college, I was in the Big East, so I had a chance to go up and play at Pittsburgh. I had a chance to go and play at West Virginia. I'll never forget being hit by batteries on the sideline. But then when our team bus was pulling up at West Virginia, because everything is hilly now, when you're going up in Morgantown, the fans rocking our bus. But you love that type of atmosphere. And as an opponent, if you're going into that, man, your juices and the hair on your arm is standing up because that's the kind of environment you want to play in. But those two schools, those two towns, those two areas, whatever you want to call them, 70, 75 miles away from one another? But then you see Clemson and South Carolina, those two teams still play. Louisville, Kentucky, they still play. You have Georgia, Georgia Tech, those two teams still play. The Backyard Brawl should be played every year. No exceptions. I don't care what anybody says because that energy in that stadium in Pittsburgh this past weekend was probably one of the best, if not the best, in college football the entire weekend.
I like your idea of having that kick off the Thursday night part of Labor Day weekend with the Backyard Brawl. That's a fantastic idea. So Pittsburgh, West Virginia, if you're listening, ESPN, if you're listening, pay attention to Harry Douglas. He knows exactly what he's talking about when it comes to that. Speaking of juice and electricity, a lot of that next to Anthony Richardson based on the game he had versus Utah, an electric game that I hope that game doesn't get lost. I know what he was able to do, but that game was physical. It was tough. These young men were getting after it. It was maybe the most fun game that a lot of people should talk about more, being one of the better games of the weekend, involving Florida knocking off number 7 Utah at home in front of the largest opening day crowd in the history of the Swamp. But a lot of talk, a lot of chatter about Anthony Richardson, what he did at quarterback, even from Dan Orlovsky, ESPN, NFL, and college football analyst.
He's got one start, and he's number 12 in Mel Kiper's list. You know, he's that incredible of a talent. So I think he's absolutely going to be into that conversation. A young man that's only going to get better, and now he's got a coach that really, really does a good job of developing quarterbacks. I cannot wait. He's going to hop into the top 5 for sure.
I'm glad that Dan Mullen is a compadre of ours now as an ESPN college football analyst, and I've known Dan for more than a minute. But I wonder, Harry, if he still would have his job at Florida if he played that guy a little bit more last year.
I just thought he was a guy that should have been played earlier last year. Emory Jones struggled early last year as well. So then when you look at a guy like his size, and in the back of my mind, I'm saying, okay, there was at one point when the University of Florida had a guy named Cam Newton. Now, Cam Newton was there at the same time that Tim Tebow was there. So we know that wasn't going to happen, and he wasn't going to override that. Plus, Cam had the issues at Florida and had to go to JUCO and then transfer and went to Auburn. But I always said to people, and people thought I was crazy, if Cam Newton wouldn't have been the quarterback for the University of Florida all those years, they probably would have won a national championship every single year.
Really?
And now every single year. Because you look at his talent, you look at what he did at Auburn. Now, granted, he had to go through some stuff and then grow up. But I still think if he was able to play at Florida and be there as the starting quarterback every year, Florida would have won the national championship every year. I do believe that.
Okay.
Because you look at the size, you look at the arm strength, you look at how the offense was tailored towards him, and that's why I love Billy Napier being at Florida now running that spread option, because you have a guy in Anthony Richardson who I think is more athletic. I think he's faster than Cam Newton, and his arm strength. I posted a video on my Instagram at HDouglas83, if y'all are wondering, of Anthony Richardson looking to his left, dropping back in the pocket, looking left, knowing that he wants to go right and throw the seam ball to the right side of the football field, quickly flipped his hips, but the arm strength, getting the ball there, throwing it on the rope, throwing that rifle. Those intangibles are what you see NFL coaches sob over. And then you see the two-point conversion that a lot of y'all are seeing right now. You fake the throw, jump in the air, spin to the right, and then just flick it in the back of the end zone for the two-point conversion. And you see the young man with his hands out. But those intangibles are what NFL scouts, owners, GMs, head coaches, offensive coordinators are going to be slobbing out the mouth over, because you just don't find players like that every day in college.
Excuse me, hold on a second. Yeah. Hi, Tim Tebow? Yeah. Oh, you want to talk to Harry Douglas after the show about what he said about Cam Newton? Yeah, I got his number. I'll text it to you, and you guys can talk after.
No lies detected.
I appreciate it. No problem. Yeah, Tim Tebow wants to talk to you after the show about that whole Cam Newton thing.
Hey, I love Tim. But let's be honest now. Cam Newton was a better quarterback than Tim Tebow.
In college?
Let's be honest.
I know the one year at Auburn. I mean, I get it. I understand it. But Tim